Welcome back to the OAC headquarters. We just heard a great session on the topic of algorithms and transparency with the cities of Amsterdam and Helsinki. And we're now talking a bit more about policy in relation to local data, open data action. And I'm very excited about this particular session because open data is a big topic for many cities, not just the big ones, but also the smaller ones who are just starting out on their open data journey. And I am very excited to be joined today by such great speakers. And without further ado, you will hear about that in a moment, who will be there. I just keep, a bit more of the pressure up here. But we will start with an introduction from Rushi Rama, who's the Smart City Lead at the World Economic Forum. And he will be giving an introduction to the open data, the work of the G20 Smart Cities Alliance, who has been working on several policies for cities. And he'll give an introduction of the work that has been carried out over the last year. Rushi, with that, I will hand over to you to introduce the work that you've been doing.
Thank you, Leah. And I'm very excited to be here. In fact, I was just saying that I'm really desperate to watch the previous session because this is one of those conferences which really gets to the point and has a level of expertise that very few can match. So really pleased to be here and very happy to have some of our Alliance members here as well. My name is Rushi Rama, as Leah said. I'll tell you a little bit about the Alliance for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then as quickly as possible hand over to my good friend and superstar, Andrew Collinge, who can tell us more about the open data policy in particular and introduce the rest of the panel. So to begin with, where is this Alliance coming from? What are we about? When did it start? All the rest. We started in 2019. If you saw any Smart City Live, you'll see we did a whole long 1-hour session about the history of the Alliance, etc. So I'll just boil it down to the highlights. When the Japanese government was heading up the G20 back in 2019, they put data and smart cities very much on the agenda, and they called for the creation of a coalition of cities, a coalition of partners to help make progress in this sector. Of course, there are many such coalitions, and so when we set about making partnerships with organizations like OASC and many others, it was quite apparent that this is a space which has been buzzing for years and years now, and yet technology governance is still a challenge across the world. And the World Economic Forum and the alliance we're trying to create sees itself as playing a special role in dealing with the technology governance issue. So we're not interested, or we're not focusing on technology solutions. We're not focusing on creating kind of smart city strategies overall or anything like that. We're trying to really address some of the core challenges that the sector as a whole has seen in areas like privacy, cybersecurity, interoperability, business models, the like. We know that certain cities have made massive progress in that. If you look at your Amsterdams, if you look at your Seattles, your Torontos, there's been so much progress in developing the right policies to answer these questions, and yet thousands of cities, as you're very well aware, are still trying to answer those same questions almost in isolation, and that's the problem we're trying to solve. So we're not, again, as I said, trying to figure out how the smart city will achieve, say, environmental sustainability or economic growth. Those are things which are pretty well understood. That's the strategy side of the equation. Instead, what we're focusing on are the governance challenges. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just share with you a couple of slides which kind of go into that in a little bit more detail. Because I thought it would be best not to bore this crowd with an abundance of slides. So where are we focusing those efforts? Well, we're starting with a roadmap that builds on 5 objectives. As I said, your environmental sustainability, your jobs creation, your economic growth, all of the things which you associate with a smart city strategy's success or strategic objectives, we assume that you're already handling that as part of your strategy. But what we understand is that we need policies across all cities that hit these 5 buckets. And it's, our original research shows that involves a lot of policies. And so, we could do what other frameworks have done and say, let's just produce a recommendation or a guideline for each of these buckets. But we know from experience, and we know from the last decade, that just providing a guideline is nowhere near enough. What we need is deep implementable policies in each of these areas. And you'll notice many of these policies are things which your city, for example, may have solved long ago. But that's the point. It's that there's an unevenness across cities, and that some of these policies are foundational. And so we need to have a model policy in place that the cities that are being left behind or small cities can look to as a reference point. So looking at this kind of challenge, you can see it's a lot. And as you see from the header, we decided instead of trying to do a poor job with 30 or 40, we'll start with 5 and try and do a good job and create something that's deep and implementable in those 5. And so we assembled international experts. We have more than 60 in our working group at the moment who helped us to pin down what these 5 would be. And we picked these not because they're necessarily the most important, but because they were both important and pretty easy for us to get off the ground to begin with. And what we're going to do today is we're going to speak to Andrew Collinge, who led one of the task forces on open data policy and has been really a superstar for the Alliance in putting that together, as I said. In terms of next steps, just for everyone's awareness, we know that this approach that we're taking of creating these deep implementable model policies is an approach. We need to test whether or not that approach is the right approach. And so what we're doing is we've gone to a lot of cities from around the world, big and small, to test whether or not these things are going to work. And we have counted so far 36 of these cities that are willing to test it with us. You can see here a bit more detail about what these policies involve. So, reading from top to bottom, I'm not going to go through all of them in detail, but you can see that the open data policies sits right in the middle. It's a great area where, open data policy has been around for years now, and yet there are so many places in the world that don't have, a model policy in place. And there's been a lot of movement as well in terms of what a model policy really means in this context. So these are the cities that we have lined up to test this with us. As you can see, 36 cities, every region, big and small, some rich cities, some not so rich, some fast urbanizing, some not, some a little bit more mature. And that's deliberate. That mix was selected in order for us to make sure that this approach actually has validity across all sorts of different contexts. So that's what's coming up next for the Alliance. I think that's enough on the kind of very, very high level. And I'm going to hand over basically now to Andrew to take it on from here. And he can tell us more about the open data policy, but really dive into open data issues with what is a very expert panel that the OASC has assembled for us. So Andrew, I'll stop sharing slides now and I'll just pass it to you.
Rushi, thank you very, very much. You called me a superstar then twice within about the space of 2 minutes. So I shall now go on to disprove that I'm a superstar, and we'll talk through the open data policy that, as you said, we have had the privilege of developing as part of the G20 Global Smart Cities Alliance. And I have some people alongside me who, as you say, are the proper superstars, the proper experts who do this on a day-to-day basis. I'll introduce the panelists properly in a moment, but first, I'm just going to do a few slides as well, and I promise to be brief, and I'll introduce myself just while I start sharing my screen for those who don't know me. I did 8 years in, sorry, bear with me 1 second. 8 years in City Hall in London, working for the Mayor of London and establishing the London Data Store. And for the last couple of years, I've been working in Smart Dubai, the data and digital accelerator for Dubai government. And I'll just get straight into the detail, really. This policy, as Rushi said, sits within a wider set of, well, an initial 5 broader policies. In bringing it together, what we've tried to do is cater to experience and draw on cities' experience who have already embarked on their data journey, whilst also trying to gain insight from those cities who, as Rushi said, are just setting out on their data journey. So we've gone to cities large and small, and those who are more mature and advanced in their data journey, as well as those who are just starting out. So I just want to do a quick name check of some of my colleagues who helped out on the actual task force. Yasunori Mochizuki, who's a fellow from the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution in Japan and works for NEC, was my co-lead. And then, as you can see, we had representation from Melbourne, in Europe, Amsterdam, in South Central America, Colombia, and Jennifer Park from the US. But around this, we also had a sort of penumbra, a review group, which involved people like Brigitte Lutz, who we'll be hearing from in a few minutes from the city of Vienna, from organizations like Microsoft, from a group of cities in Belgium, and again, we'll be hearing from Nils in a few minutes' time, who leads that particular group, and core members from the Open and Agile Smart Cities organization. So it's a really broad group of people who in the end have worked on this policy and then reviewed it to make sure that we have something that, as Rushi said, is foundational. This is the context, really, and again, I'm just going to whiz through this, but just to say that this is about responsible technology governance that we think cities have to embark upon, given the way in which IoT and sensors are moving into public spaces, and with the growth of digital business models moving further and further into government. Data is everywhere. This means that there are various issues that we have to deal with through responsible governance. There is a wider attack surface, which means that we have to concentrate harder than ever on the cyber security threat. We have to look at vendor lock-in and consider what sort of business models best work for cities so that they can take advantage of the best technology on an ongoing basis with regards to data publishing. Privacy is a real hot topic. Think about some of the news this week about certain large technology companies and the way that they're thinking about or proposing that data is shared between the various applications. That's happening in the private sector now. It will happen increasingly in the public sector and in cities, the spaces that we govern, given what I've just been saying about the rapid growth of IoT. But getting down to brass tacks and on the policy itself, a question that we can quite legitimately ask ourselves is, why is open data right now important? It's been around for a long time, is my first point. So you could argue that it's time for a refresh. It was 10 years ago when the London Data Store was first launched. And in that time, there has been a huge amount of change. And just to go through some quick line items here. Technology is advancing. Data technologies that help us to publish and store data, as well as technologies that allow us to exploit data. I've just been mentioning IoT and other urban technologies as well. The way in which society considers data has also moved on as well. There have been various cases in cities where surveillance cameras have been turned off because of the way that society has responded to them, and city challenges have shifted as well. Certainly, it's not with great happiness, obviously, that COVID is brought up in any presentation, but the way in which it has not just changed the way that we work, but has changed the way that society is operating. Can move around the urban environment, can access labour markets and can access services. All that has changed, and data has been proven to have a key role in how cities and public services more generally respond to the pandemic that we're moving through as well. Tightening budgets. This is something that I felt in my professional role. How do you justify data operations, not least open data operations, at a time when calls on budgets are coming from left, right and centre? How do you make that case? And I suppose this brings me to the last point here. I think it's incumbent upon cities to treat data as a strategic access. All the data that they collect, all of the data that they marshal and publish, it's up to us to make sure that we drive the maximum innovation value out of it so that you can encourage the ecosystem to form contestable markets around it. So I think open data, as well as being a decade old, we have to look to what we do in the next decade with open data, which is what this policy really is all about. Luckily for you, we are not going to go through 7 detailed sections in this presentation here. I'm just trying to give you a super quick taste about what you'll find in the policy when hopefully you go to it. But it's full of examples as well. It's not just policy words. You will find examples from cities like Vienna in there, London, Dubai, which I'll touch on in a moment, but many more besides, some with some quite unexpected entries as well. And then the supplementary guidance for emerging issues as well. We've tried to make this policy foundational, but also looking to some of the strategic and future-oriented issues that we know we're going to have to deal with. Monetization, for example, is something that you'll find featuring in an open data policy, which might on the face of it sound a little bit strange, but we think it's something that in the right circumstances is a way of proving the value of data and how it's used in cities. It's not just about raw commercialization. So just before finishing, just one super quick example. This is where we are saying within the policy how open data policies need to be coherent with other strategies and policies in the city to have maximum effect. So how do you connect your open data policy to the ICT security policy and privacy policies? How do you, with a view to making sure that the data is safe, that the data is treated ethically and the data protects privacy? As well as that, how do you just make sure that data links into a broader set of policies that most city halls are responsible for? Economic policies, environmental policies, spatial planning policies. We're encouraging cities and data leaders within cities to try to make the case for the inclusion of open data within such policies, so that open data is a tool that is used by other policy customers within cities. Super quick example. I have to do a super quick advertorial for Dubai before we hand over to other cities. But this really is just to prove the value of the policy itself. When you click on these examples, you will find really helpful source material. In this case, a whole set of open documents that you can go to. In this case, Dubai's data standards, which touch on data identification, classification, publication, tips to improve data quality, how to present metadata, advice on how you form teams and the roles and responsibilities that you can assign potentially to data champions who work in other organizations. So the point is lots of value that sits underneath the surface of the policy documents itself. So it's nearly panel time. I encourage people on the webinar today to find out more. I think Rushi would agree with me that this is a work in progress. We want other cities to go and poke and prod at it, to contribute and to build out from what we have today. We have a set of pioneer cities as well who in 2021 will be really getting down to the detail and will be starting to implement parts of, if not all of this policy in their own cities. And again, if you go to the URL that you see here, you can find out how you can get involved in those sorts of activities. So it's time to stop sharing the screen and it's time to share some discussion with our panelists. So I'm now going to introduce them quickly. I'm really happy to be joined by Brigitte Lutz from Vienna. Brigitte, do you want to say hello super quickly?
Hello, all from Vienna, or from my home office nearby Vienna, and I'm really happy to be here at this virtual conference. Last year I have been there in Brussels, and I'm really happy to speak about our policies and about open data in general, because I'm a fan of open data.
Good. And let me just introduce you super quickly as well. So you're the data governance coordinator, working in the office of the CIO in the city of Vienna. And you are a founding member of the Open Government Data Collaboration for Austria. So I think you're going to have some really interesting insights on how federal government, states, cities, towns, academics, communities work to drive value out of open data in Austria. And as well, I think you are city representative Vienna on the OASC board of directors as well. And yours is one of the, I mean, you were kind enough to review the policy documents, but you also are featured in one of the example documents. There's a great piece of work that you did under the Smarter Together European Commission project, where you evaluated data platforms from across Europe with a view to implementing your own data platform within Vienna. So thank you for that sort of very obvious contribution, well, a couple of very obvious contributions to the policy. Quickly to Nils. Nils Walravens, are you there, Nils? You've disappeared from my.
I'm here.
There you are. Nils, let me introduce you, and then you can add anything that I miss out. Nils is also an OASC board member, but Nils is a senior researcher at the Free University of Brussels, imec, and specifically Nils works in SMIT, which is studies on media, innovation and technology, doing research on smart cities and open data. But I think it's safe to say that Nils is not just an academic, he is full of practical experience as well. Nils, you coordinated the Smart Flanders program of 13 cities and worked with them to develop an open data policy, which has been approved by all of those 13 cities and adopted by the Flemish government as an ambition for open government more widely. So that's you. You might want to add something. I hope I'm not selling you short.
No, not at all. No, very happy to be here as well. Was also there physically last year. I would have hoped we would be able to do that already, but unfortunately we have to solve it this way. But indeed, sort of making this combination between what we see from the academic and from the research perspective and combining that with practical work, working together with the cities, has really been very insightful over the last couple of years. And we also came up with what I think is quite a good policy and an interesting approach, I think. Yeah.
We'll be asking you more about that in a second. And finally, we have Burcu Özdemir, Dr. Burcu Özdemir from the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality, where she is director of the Smart City Department. Dr. Burcu is responsible for the technology offices, Smart City projects, the big data and analytics teams, and runs the open data portal as well. So a wide range of responsibilities there, but also continuing to pursue her academic career. She lectures at postgraduate level in those areas in the Applied Informatics Department at Istanbul Technical University, and she's done that since 2017. Burcu, do you want to say hello quickly?
First, thank you, Andrew, and hello everyone from city of Istanbul.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Very good that you're with us. So there are our three esteemed panelists, and now it's time for me to be very quiet and to get our panelists, or put our panelists to work. And the way that we're going to do this, I mean, I think some questions might be able to appear in the YouTube chat. I think we're on a 1 minute time lapse, so we'll try to get as much audience participation going as we can. I've got one broad question for each of the panelists, then we're just going to try to get into a bit of a deeper discussion. So I'm going to turn to Brigitte first. Brigitte, Vienna has a data excellence strategy, I think. Would you just mind spending a couple of minutes talking us through it and really indicating for us how that data excellence strategy influences the way that data is used within the city of Vienna?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Andrew. We have the data excellence strategy since 2019, and the strategy is embedded in the digital agenda of the city of Vienna. As we heard before, responsibility to use the principles of the digital agenda and a part of it. How did we come to the data excellence strategy? I think it was partly a logical consequence after publishing open data since 2011. This year, 2021, is a jubilee year for us as we celebrate 10 years open data in Vienna. And so it also was a pleasure to take part at the open data model policy work, because we really learned a lot in these 10 years. And I think we also learned a lot to see that data represent a stable core of the information management in the city. And we think that the city's digital IQ is enhanced by data. As we all know, data production factor for smart and intelligent and digital cities. There are no digital applications without data. So we realized that we need a clean data landscape where in all areas of administration the data is managed, and that we have to set up a data excellence organization. This was the first step. So the data governance is the first pillar of our strategy. This means that setting up the organization, we've defined dedicated roles like data stewards, data experts, and data users. And we also set up an extensive training program for them, because in former times, as we started with open data, we only had contact points in the departments, and they had no trainings doing their job. So we have the training program. For example, a data steward has 5 days of training in all fields of data management. We also have set up a strategic and an operational board, and also a data excellence community, an internal community with meetups for the data stewards and for the data experts. And the second pillar of our strategy is data quality management. So we set up processes for this, for the data quality management. And so we think that data management is affected in all areas by our data excellence strategy. And we try to establish it by project which implemented in an agile way.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll come back to data governance a little later. I think it's yeah, never mind a pillar, it's an absolute fundamental building block that is often underrated. So lots of important stuff to touch on there. I want to go to Nils next. In introducing Nils, I said that he'd been working with 13 cities in the Flanders region, which reminds me a little bit of my time in London when I was trying to work with municipal authorities across London and to drive an open data agenda with them and achieve some practical impact. So it's a similar question to you, Nils, really. What were the drivers to establish the data strategy that you did in Flanders? And in a practical sense, you know, how has your work really helped those cities to open up data? What have you done, I suppose, is the you know, the simplest way that I can put the question.
Thanks for that. Well, so yeah, we work together with those 13 cities and the Flemish government as well. So the government of Flanders, responsible for the interior, basically. And that already was an interesting combination to tackle this question from both the local level and the regional level together. And what were the main drivers? Well, the biggest question or the thing that we came to realize was that there was a big knowledge gap between those cities. Even those larger cities, and we're talking about Flanders, the biggest city is 500,000 inhabitants, is Antwerp. The smallest is Turnhout with 40,000 inhabitants. So at the European level, that's already a pretty small city. There was a really big knowledge and skill gap between those cities, which is, I mean, normal also. And so we wanted to first establish was a sort of common ground. Where are we all starting from? And also where do we want to go? What's our vision? What's our ambition? And that's what we put into that open data charter. So we really wrote it together with the cities. Of course, we took inspiration from what was already internationally available at the time, and we started in 2017. Already a lot of work had been done in other places, so we got inspiration from that. Of course, we looked at all the legislation that was available at the European level and the transposition at the local level, of course. And so we put all of that together, and we basically had a lot of discussions and interaction about this to finally come up with 20 principles that we put forward as a sort of the ambition for open data in Flanders. And so indeed, those 13 cities, all of them adopted that open data charter, as well as the Flemish government, which was also really nice to see that sort of this effort that started bottom up. We developed the content with the cities, and from this city perspective was also adopted at the regional level as the ambition for open data going forward. And so we took the deliberate strategy of formulating those principles in a more general way. We want those to be as timeless as possible, basically, those principles themselves. But then behind, sort of similar to the policy of the Global Smart City Alliance, we also have guidelines and really sort of inspirational documents to support bringing those principles to practice. One of the most important ones is almost sort of a legal translation of those principles, where we have a manual with example clauses that local administrations, that cities and even smaller towns can use when they're procuring solutions. And when you're buying anything from the market, on the market, that collects data and wants to publish that data in an open way, everyone was using basically different language to describe those contracts. And sometimes there wasn't even anything in there about data. Who can access the data, under which terms, under which conditions, can we publish them, how, for how long, who's responsible when something goes wrong. In some cases, all of that was just missing. It wasn't even there. In other cases, it was sort of not formulated in a proper way. Of course, people were doing their best, but it wasn't solid, you know. And so what we did there is come up with this common language, common ground that everyone can just copy paste into their procurement when they're buying solutions that are using data and publishing data in a way. So that was really a very practical way of making that charter. It's nice to have a charter. It's nice to have mayors sign a charter, but then what do you actually do? That making it concrete was that manual to procure solutions.
It's again, I want to bring Burcu in relatively quickly. So thank you for your brevity there, Nils. It's interesting though what you say about sort of embedding the language of data into procurement processes. And one of the things that I want to come back to you on, one of the follow-up questions for a few minutes' time, I think might be around like data platforms and interoperability of data and standards. So do you have one data platform for 13 cities, or do you just lay down the guidance for it, or do you let them all run wild? We'll come back to that in a few minutes' time. So I want to get to Burcu, who's been patiently waiting. Burcu, thank you. Istanbul, you have an ambitious open data roadmap, and for me, Istanbul has sort of emerged quite rapidly in the last couple of years under your leadership. So just again, tell us how far along the road you are and where you're taking open data in 2021. And I'm going to stick with the roads metaphor. Tell us about the potholes in the road. What problems are you encountering right now? And be honest.
Yeah, I like the adjective ambitions. We are really ambitious about the open data platform. Actually, we launched our open data platform public on last January. It means 1 year old baby, but its parents were 16 million people. Our population is huge. Yeah. I mean, maybe 1 year old baby, but yeah. And also, one important thing, we are the first organization in the public sector to implement an open data portal in Turkey, we want to lead the other municipalities. We want to separate this ecosystem because we really believe that the power of open data, if you want to manage your city in a correct way. And what we did in our open data platform, we made available to citizens in 8 smart city functional area, which are the environment, mobility, security, energy, human governance, and economy. And since it was launched, we also trying to improve our open data platform, and we add some hackathon to improve the physical open data platform, also the context, also infrastructure. Currently, the number of data sets in the portal is around 150, and data transfer size is around 1,200 gigabytes in daily. It is also good for us. I mean, we have the 70,000 average daily reach, and total access is right now is 80 million. I mean, but we are planning to achieve around 250,000 within the scope of the total number of unique users. And we are going to also want to complete the 250 new data set in this year. What is our plans? Actually, we really like to create a portal forum who is going to use this open data and who is going to use some product when they share their idea, when they share their project, when they share some suggestion or also criticism, because the open data also really open to criticize from the citizen. And also we are planning the 2 hackathons related to open data. Then we can show the the public sector how important that kind of data, if you give the citizen, if you give the entrepreneurs, academician. And I guess this year we are going to show a little bit to how can achieve all together when you are using the open data portal with your entrepreneurs and your citizen to solve the daily urban problem or something similar this city problem. Yeah.
So you seem quite energetic and passionate about data, Burcu, and you said something quite interesting there, which was about how you almost want to prove the case to fellow public servants about the value of open data and to do so by running hackathons. Is that something that you really consider to be part of your job? And is it something where you're finding challenges, or are public servants in Turkey dying to get hold of open data and make it work? What's your assessment?
Yeah, actually one of the belongs to my department is the entrepreneurs innovation hubs in Istanbul. There is one problem, and then who is going to face that problem in daily life? They have a more, how can I say, more agile and quick solution using that data, because it is totally different than the hiring one company to solve this problem and then solving the problem with citizens. And also, as you know, that we are going to face with the earthquake, possible earthquake in Istanbul, and everybody thinking it. And when we had this earthquake hackathon, the solution, and then their idea was great. So many people get impression for this. People want to solve the problem of their city. They want to be part of it. They want to solve it because they are living in here. Because we are so ambitious, we are trying to, saying to all of platform, hey, join us. We have some data. We want to also improve this open data and sharing with us to solve all together. Yeah.
Thank you. So Brigitte, I'd like to return to you now, because this is of real interest to me. I think data governance is the unsung hero, really, of the open data world. I think it deserves a lot more attention than it actually gets. And I just want to talk to you quickly about how useful data governance is in bringing open data out. In Dubai, we have a really well sort of organized data classification scheme where we have open data, shared data, confidential data, sensitive, and so on. And I just want to understand how it works in Vienna. Do you find that data governance is a help or a hindrance?
Oh, sure, it is helpful because I'm the data governance coordinator, so it's my job, and I hope I'm helpful. I spoke about the processes. One part of publishing open data are the processes, and one part is, as you said, to make the classification of the data, because we don't only have open data in our work in a government, we also have classified data, secret data, personal data, and so on. And the classification is the first step, I think. And then the publishing process. We publish data 4 times a year, and there's a strict process, so everybody knows what to do on which time, and so it's the easiest way for all to make the publication. But it's not only the process, also the roles, that everyone knows what he or she has to do. So we have to have the strict rules, and everybody knows which head do I have now. So I also always say the members of the Data Excellence organization, which is everyone in our organization, are the real data heroes we have.
Can I ask you then, does your data governance model, or does your broader open data effort stretch into the private sector? On one of my slides, I alluded to sort of like mixed business models, and obviously the private sector operates in cities, in the sort of mobility, in the environment, in the energy space, lots more besides. Is private sector a part of your open data approach in Vienna?
The private sector, the science, and everyone are these who use our data. There are not so many organizations or privates who publish open data. It's not fine because there, I think, like in a government, also in the economy, there would be a lot of data which would be open and usable. For example, opening hours. Opening hours are so useful for everyone, and I think there are a lot of apps who could use them for better services in a city. But our job is to open up our data and to enable the others to make apps or visualizations or other services for the people in the city. And I'm proud that we have more than 500 apps and visualizations we know which are made with open data.
Okay, thank you. So I want to go back to Nils, who's been waiting patiently. And Nils, I spoke to, I sort of set you up a few minutes ago when I said I'd like to ask you about, I suppose, how you've achieved uniformity, or how you have driven a coordinated approach to data platforms, for example, because I think it's one of the things that emerged from our policy work. It's, you know, do we advocate each and every municipal authority of different sizes to set up a data platform for themselves, or is there a better / federated way? Over to you to sort of tell us a little bit more about Flanders.
In our case, we don't. We definitely don't advocate for everyone having their own portal necessarily. It's more about publishing your data as much as you can on the web, and preferably in the web as much as possible, using linked data whenever relevant and feasible, so that you lower the cost and you don't necessarily need your own open data portal. What we advocate as sort of a minimum is using the DCAT standard, because that means, as a metadata standard, because that means that your data will also be findable in the Flemish open data portal, which we have, but we also have a Belgian data portal, and of course the European data portal. And so what our conclusion sort of has been is that in some cities it's just not necessary. Yeah, it's not a requirement to have your own portal set up. Definitely for these smaller cities, the cost doesn't necessarily outweigh the benefits. So where we go for is as much standardization as possible, using proper metadata standards whenever possible, just to make the data as easily findable as possible. Using DCAT also means, for example, that it automatically appears in Google database search. And so whatever way you're using to find data sets, make your data as findable as possible, rather than having your own little portal on your website. That's sort of the philosophy that we go for.
Okay, thank you. I want to return to this question of impact as we start to bring things to a close, because I said one of the, we live in times where budgets are under pressure, and I remember a time back in City Hall in London when one of Boris Johnson's advisors just basically said to me, "What is it that you do and what impact do you have, Andrew?" And that was quite a difficult question to answer at that time. I've got a lot better at it since. And I think it's a fair challenge actually to open data leaders such as those that we have on the call here. What is your, I suppose, either your best open data impact story? So where, I mean, I'll give you a super quick example. In London, one of the quite sort of small, quick exercises, nothing grand, was to try to understand financial inclusion in deprived areas of London. And it was really fascinating because we got open data for cash machines, the location of cash machines, and we sort of overlaid those onto a map and understood how transport infrastructure and other obstacles got in the way of people who live in high-rise tower blocks getting down to cash machines. And it was a really quite, it just unearthed a series of insights that we wouldn't have arrived at necessarily. And the we in this case wasn't civil servants in City Hall, it was people on the outside who were interested in financial inclusion. I think it was a sort of, I think it was a charity who carried out that piece of work on the back of open data that they asked us to publish. So what's your sort of own data impact story? Or if you don't want to answer that, what hope do you have for open data impact in the future, given some of the policy challenges in your cities? And whoever wants to answer first, go for it. Race for the microphone.
The big impact is that everyone who uses the data science, everyone comes faster to use the data. You don't have to have the process, you have to ask for the data and where is the data. You only have to say, look at our data portal and you can use it. So a lot of processes and activities inside the government is not more, we don't need it anymore. And the other side is that it's a part of transparency and open innovation as we had before. So a lot of added value comes to the city, and a lot of more added value also for the people in the city, because we cannot do every app for every target group in the city, and we don't know, as you said, what need the people, and we don't see that by ourselves. So the others help us to see maybe where do we have our blind eye in the city.
Okay, thank you. Who's next? Nils or Burcu?
Okay, what I am thinking that if you are going to use the open data, it means that you are transparent. You are showing what you have, and then what we need to feel ourselves secure. When we are going to feel ourselves secure, when we know, and it is the Maslow hierarchy. After the physical needs, the most important things, feeling the secure. If you believe your government, if you believe your local government, and it means your citizen going to feel secure. What is the biggest impact for me is the believing your manager, believing your, I mean, all service, and also you are after it, you are going to participate. Actually, it's the Maslow needs pyramid is working with the open data, and it is going to give you the participatory democracy. You are going to be part of it. I mean, yeah, what I am seeing that it is the game changer for us, especially in our country, and because probably so many country also city is going to, I mean, already see that the power of the open data to give a high quality services, because they are getting some, I mean, criticize also some price. If they are good, they are going to move in scaling up. If they are not, it's going well, they are correcting themselves. I mean, we always think that we will succeed all together, but when we share our data, I mean, as much as the what I am thinking that the next years or after it, that all these games in the public sector is going to change because of the open data portal and the sharing the data with everyone. It doesn't matter ordinary citizens to entrepreneurs, journalists to researchers or companies. I mean, everybody going to involve, yeah.
When, Burcu, you talk about participatory democracy, are you talking about specific exercises that are active in Istanbul now, or are you just talking as a general, as a general theme?
No.
It's really interesting using open data.
Yeah. I mean, actually, this is a new vision of us. I mean, we are trying to make a culture in public sector, believing the participatory democracy, creating the awareness of the importance of it. What we are going to do, maybe probably after the 2 months later, we are going to create one digital platform. It is called the Istanbul City. Actually, this is the brand of that. And this digital platform, it's super app, including your mobile phone and including all our service. Also, there is one application. Probably Nils already know that Talk London, similar with it. Yours. Yeah. We are going to, I mean, we are so exciting also to involve all our citizens to join the decision process about the city, and we are trying to force every part.
Talk London was designed by some very clever people in my team. It's a really cool tool. But let me move to Nils, because he's been patiently waiting, and he's had longest to think up his answer about open data impact in Flanders or wherever else, Nils.
Yeah, I mean, the question is still very pertinent, and it's also what politicians definitely want when they need to spend money, and you have to show them the impact first, basically, in a lot of cases. So that's tricky. What we've learned over the years, and I think everyone can agree, is that opening up to just open up, it doesn't work. Just publishing some sets online and hoping that people will start building apps, I mean, it doesn't happen. So what the approach that we try to take is linking it as closely to policies and policy goals as possible. If you want to achieve certain goals, try to open up data that's related to those goals, and they will help you reach those goals. I think that just goes as a good general sort of rule of thumb. Try linking as closely as possible to also the political agreements in your city, and opening up data that's related to those goals. And then as a second point, it's also what we really took as a very deliberate approach was learning by doing. We really wanted to try, starting from those policy challenges, really want to try to get as much data open as we could. And by doing that, we hit a few obstacles, but we learned so much from those. And those learnings generated impact, maybe much more than actually opening up those data sets. So to give one example, off-street parking was a really big challenge in a lot of the cities in Flanders. This is in a lot of cities, almost all of them managed by private companies these days. So this is given in concession to private companies who keep those data for themselves. And by trying to open up those data, having those conversations with those companies, you arrive at these contracts that have been signed between cities and those companies, and you find out about these clauses about the data that are lacking, which basically directly led to us coming up with our model clauses and having a much broader impact than only trying to open up those parking data. So it's we did something very similar for accessibility information. Accessibility of government buildings was very fragmented, completely distributed data in Flanders, which we only found out by really digging into it and digging deep into it to come up with now a completely revamping and opening up of those databases which were closed and very difficult to access before. So it's really trying stuff. Running pilots, doing these types of things, but then not dropping them when they fail, but taking those lessons and taking the next step. And that's gradually, I think, how you arrive at impact.
Great, thank you. It's 2 minutes, well, 2 minutes to 9 here in Dubai, and it's my weekend, so I am absolutely determined to finish on time. I'm just going to give well, about 90 seconds worth of closing remarks. I mean, that's been a really valuable discussion, and thank you to Brigitte and to Burcu and to Nils, all of whom have peppered us with practical examples based on their experience and some inspiration besides. I mean, I think what I'm sort of picking up is that there are, there's lots more still to be done with open data. As I said, it's 10 years old, and the policy that we have developed is one that I hope cities can find value in. I mean, I think it works right the way across the value chain, and sort of relating to what our speakers say. There will be cities out there who need to implement, quite literally write their own open data policies and the legal instruments that fit around it. And what Brigitte was saying about the governance, I think, is super, super important. And that brings me on to implementation. I think in the policy that we've produced, it's future oriented enough, and it provides advice on standards for platforms that are technology agnostic and that allow for the freedom that municipal authorities need to deal in efficient financial terms with emerging technologies and new methods of data exchange. And also, really importantly, and everybody has touched on this, well, Nils was particularly strong on implementation and the focus there on standards and interoperability. I think Burcu talked a lot about ecosystem engagement. And again, our policy sort of focuses on how you take the work that you do internally across other city departments and out there to academia, out there to small businesses, tech businesses who really know how to make data work and to generate value in lots of terms. And I think that's my final point, really. It's about staying close to the politics. It's about doing things that I think scale is one of those words that everything has to scale nowadays, but I'm an advocate of doing things small and quickly to prove their value, and let's see what comes out of that. And I think with open data, that's really, really important, because otherwise you can build the biggest, most complex platform in the world that sort of keys into your city data infrastructure. You can collect all the open data sets in the world. If nobody's using them and you're not proving the value, then that's just an expense that people point fingers at nowadays. But I don't want to finish on that negative point. I think there is hopefully lots to get stuck into in the policy itself. So as I said before, do take a look. Thank you to OASC for hosting this today. I think it's been a great session. Thank you to Rushi as well for giving us the introduction. And I just wish everybody a pleasant rest of the day, and hope the rest of the City to City Festival goes well.